Jimmy, how we
What's
doing,
happening?
brother?
What is good?
Glad for you to make it, buddy.
Yeah, for sure.
Why don't you give us a quick synopsis on who you are, what you're doing now as it relates to commercial real estate?
Yeah, absolutely. Ton, I appreciate you having me on. I'm in Indianapolis. My name is Jimmy Shatara. I have a brokerage called Skyrise CRE, and typically we focus on tenant rep and buyer rep, about 85% of our business. And we do focus a lot on office and industrial, but we do have also retail clients, and we work throughout the state. So whether you be in Terre Haute, South Bend, we have clients in Edinburgh and Columbus, and of course, our headquarters here is at Keystone at the Crossing here in Indianapolis by the Fashion Mall. And we are just advocates for our clients, whether we're on the tenant side or the landlord side.
Love it. And how long have you been brokering?
So I was licensed in roughly 2014 for residential and jumped over to commercial, dabbling in it in 2020. And my first real property that I was a part of was an old Pizza Hut for a local chain called Kaplinger's Fetch Catch. They do think of fast casual Chipotle style for seafood. So higher end than a Long John Silver's, things like that. And got the bug then, and I've been roughly about 2.5 years full time since late 2022, and coming up on my third year in the business, and again just transitioning from just getting acclimated to the nomenclature and all of that. And basically, let me backtrack a little bit. Before I got licensed, I used to work in property management. Worked with a company called Pangea Real Estate. They were headquartered on the south side of Chicago, and they were one of the earlier adopters, if you will, of quote unquote value add in multifamily. These guys had a ton of money. They were run by a couple of young guys. I mean, everyone's in their 20s and 30s, like very high energy, high pace. I loved it. But they were also very organized. I mean, you're talking about 250 employees at the time, I think 6 to 7,000 units between Chicago and Indianapolis. And they were buying properties in cash. I'm talking about 100, 200, 300 unit plus properties in 2011. And
Holy
I
shit.
worked, yeah, I mean, giant properties. So these things had, distress, of course, on, the physical occupancy of the property, the financial occupancy. How are they going to turn around these properties? And actually, they just sold their business, I think about a year ago. So all the properties in Indianapolis are rebranded, and Chicago. I'm not sure if they sold the Baltimore portfolio, but I think they got up to about 12,000 units. I loved working for that company, but again, it's high stress. If it was Joe Blow property management, I probably would have blown out in a couple weeks, to be honest. Stayed with them for a year, but I got to see everything. I got to see the insurance audits where we had aluminum wiring we had to figure out a solution for. So we had to get adapters for all the outlets. HUD financing, getting ready, inspecting all the units, having issues with your roofs, where we had to figure out are we going to pay our deductible, or are we just going to fix it ourselves, and doing that math. Fires at properties, evictions, all these different things that if you're not organized. And I got to work with literally the leaders of this company, which was great. I got to work with the construction manager of the firm, and then the state construction manager, the property manager, the project manager of the company. And I loved it. I had two properties at separate times. I had 192 units and 202 units, and did that for a year. That's when I went into residential, and then fast forward to now, just doing commercial.
Gotcha. So that first property that you mentioned that you found, it was a Pizza Hut, right?
Yeah. Yep.
So you mentioned you got the bug after that. So what about that first property that you brokered made you love commercial even more and wanted to leave the residential world behind?
Absolutely. So that particular property, we were initially looking for a lease. So we had looked at a Subway right next to it. And then this property looked like it was for sale at one time, and it looked like it came off market. But then we ended up getting to talk to the broker. Again, this is right around COVID. We're talking about May of 2020. People don't know what's going on, and they got a crazy price for this property, and now that property is probably worth 2.5 times what they bought it for close to 5.5 years ago. So just looking at that property, how are they going to turn it around? What makes it different than other properties we look at? So looking at parking, how are they going to maximize what they're going to do in the kitchen? They can utilize some of the the equipment, the coolers, and this repair. So when I talk about getting the bug, and actually ended up selling the property across the street, it was an old HVAC showroom. So even though this is not a term in our industry, I call it retail flex. You have a showroom that really is a retail storefront, but they had a warehouse in a garage that was detached in the back where they were putting their equipment. Ended up selling it to a small motorsports company. And my client, he owned the car lot next door to that building. And I told him, I said, look, this is cheap. It was like 150 grand. It says 400, it's like 4,500 square feet. It's dirt cheap. It's owned by a bank. Buy it. I know you don't own commercial real estate. It does not matter. He ended up buying it, and I think we sold it for $265 like in a year and a half. So he didn't have to do anything to it. And just getting the bug, commercial real estate allows you to be creative. It's not just, I'm going to buy a house, I'm going to put a single tenant into it, and that's it. When you flip a house and you renovate it, you're doing value add, but it's only up to a point. There's only so many levers we can pull in extracting value from that asset. With commercial, there's a lot more levers we can look at. And that's what really acclimated me and getting me more interested in staying in it for the long term.
Love it, love it. And that's essentially why I got into commercial real estate. All the creativity that you have behind it and all these different things that you can do and the complexity behind it. Whereas when you're in residential, it's a lot more cookie cutter, right? There's
absolutely
pretty much just you're doing the same playbook left and right with whatever you're doing. So it gets monotonous, right? But probably the most important question that I have for you is, what separates a good broker from a great broker?
Absolutely. That's a good question. With any broker that a client's going to work with, they have to have certain attributes they're going to bring to the table. One, of course, market knowledge is important with the property type you're seeking to acquire or lease. So do they know what the rental rates are going to be, but also equally as important, the incentives. So if you're going to go into a property that's long-term, if you are a business owner, you need to know what kind of incentives we can get for that particular property and what's going to make that property ideal for your use. If you're an investor, you have to have a broker that is going to truly take you through a process and see, okay, if we hit these challenges, these speed bumps, whether that is in our LOI that we're going to put on the property, so it's non-binding at that point, then we're going to actually go into PSA, what we should include. Again, these are table stakes things. We need to have certain requirements for days for due diligence, for physical, for all the documentation that we're going to need. And then when we are under contract, what are you considering? I can give you an example. There was a property that my client was looking at, but unfortunately we backed out where some of the things in the leases were allowing, the anchor tenant, they could leave. They had a provision if the occupancy went to a certain limit, then they could actually terminate their lease, or they could drop their rental rate by 50%. So are we going to be able to know that up front? And again, just knowing these basic terms, like, look, this is an anchor that has 25% of your square footage. They probably have maybe that provision in their contract. So how are you going to mitigate that up front? Also just asking these certain questions. Does your broker ask this to the listing agent? What deferred maintenance do they have on the property? Again, table stakes, the roof, the HVAC systems, the parking lot, all these different things. So that broker needs to be able to have those conversations with the opposing side and also have, a documented process they're going to take you through when you actually acquire the property.
So what you're saying is a lot of communication between the two parties
Yeah.
and understanding the asset as well as if you were going to buy it yourself, correct?
Yeah, I mean, you have to be able to run through a financial analysis where if you're going to buy it through this, first of all, what's your reason for buying it? So, is that broker asking you questions on your goals? So, do you have any other assets like this? So, they're going to take you through an initial consultation and ask you, first of all, why do you want to buy this asset in particular? But more importantly, how does it fit in with your portfolio or your investing strategy in general? Are you buying just commercial properties? Are you buying residential? Do you own other businesses that are cash flowing? How does this actually fit into what you're doing? So, what are you going to do with it when you get it? Are you looking to go in? Maybe there's some vacancy, you're going to lease it back up, and then you're trying to resell in an X amount of period. Are you buying it for yourself? Or do you have investors involved with this project so it's going to affect on how you're going to, your exit? So really just having those questions answered up front and having those conversations with your broker, just making sure that they know what you're actually wanting to get out of this.
Gotcha. So communication is huge.
100%.
Now, in the brokerage world, there's a shit ton of brokerages out there,
100%.
right? I mean, big, small, all over the place. I feel like a firm's opening up every other minute or something.
Absolutely.
So how do you handle the competition with all those other brokers? Is it pretty cutthroat? Is it one of those where you have some collaboration with them, or and I guess a second part of my question with this is how do you yourself stand out amongst a sea of all these other cats out there?
Yeah, no, those are two great questions. So addressing the first one with how do you navigate the brokerage landscape with either it's an independent boutique brokerage like myself to the mainstays, the international firms that we've all seen. So at the end of the day, we're an opaque industry. Not all that data is going to be out there. Indiana, for example, is a non-disclosure state. I know there's other non-disclosure states throughout the United States where you can't just depend on the tax assessor to get a sales price. And even then, when you do have a sales price, what were the conditions of that sale? You're not going to always know if it was 100% occupied if you're not in the market collaborating with market intelligence with other brokers. So I can give you an example how I collaborate. I have friends that are not just brokers, they're also small developers, and they can tell me their viewpoint on looking at, let's say it's a 75,000 square foot grocery that's vacant. And if I was going to split that up into 3 bays, these square footage amounts, they don't really exist on the market. And the reason why they don't exist on the market, it's very hard to fill a 20,000 square foot space in the suburbs. And they can tell me what they would think it would rent for, and then I'm validating that with other market participants, other brokers that are maybe focused just on that asset. We have people that are more focused on retail, and that's all they do in their brokerage, and then they're a boutique, as well as the same thing for an industrial type of broker or for office. So I have to have those relationships, and at the end of the day, I think a good broker is going to have the attribute of let me give more, because I'd rather them come to me for that than me go to them with really not asking for anything in return. I rather be the source of quote unquote truth, some type of data point to give them value. So when I do need to reach out, they've came to me 5 times, I'm going to them once. And I think that's something that every broker should strive for. You can't be an island. Even though you are competing for business, we all are. I reach out all the time to other brokers, and I rather have them reach out to me more than me to them.
Essentially, what you're saying is that you're keeping your ears on the ground and you're leveraging the network and the relationships around you in order to find the most accurate data to present to either your buyers or your landlords.
Yeah,
or tenants?
absolutely. I mean, a lot of this when you want to figure out a lease rate, like we were talking about before, where maybe that data is not readily available, or I have to go to some type of market that I think is similar, but it's not in the same city or the same submarket, I will, test that rental rate with other brokers. And because I have that relationship, I can have those conversations and they can tell me, okay, I think that's in the ballpark, or no, there probably has to be adjustment. And then you'll have to do maybe this construction to this property. Maybe you have to give these type of concessions. This type of tenant, credit tenant, and when I mean credit tenant, do they have multiple locations? Are they making this type of revenue so it makes sense for them to afford that rental rate? So you have to have your ears to the ground and always talking to different brokers. To your second point about how do you stand out as a broker, I think a good broker is going to be able to stand out on, again, you have to have a book of business, of course, a pedigree, if you will, on to show specific examples of how you have demonstrated value to your client, whether that be on the tenant rep side, the landlord rep side, or on the investment sales side. And how can you look at a property that is not as obvious to a typical broker? So I helped a client buy a particular property where the zoning allowed for small contractor garages, but it's for an auto lot today. Well, I told him, I said, look, where the surrounding development around you, I know there was a couple guys that were buying a lot of properties around him, and at the time, and now to this day, it's proven out. This is close to 4 years ago, 3.5 years ago, where I said, look, you're doing a covered land play. And what a covered land play is basically you are buying a piece of property, whether you're just going to sit on that piece of property or there's already a building or other type of use that you're able to lease it out and generate income. And then later on, the land itself is going to turn into something else, whether that be a development or just a better and higher use. And that is getting proven out with this particular client where now it does make sense to develop it into the in property that we're seeking to do. So are they creative? Are they saying, look, what is not as obvious to generate value here? And then also really how are they going to market your property if they're listing it? Do they have brokers that they meet with on a regular basis? Do they have investor groups that they're a part of? Not just putting something on the internet and putting a sign in the yard. You got to look for less obvious ways to get traction for that listing, or find properties when it's going to be hard to find that asset, whether it's for lease or for sale.
So once again, this is where creativity comes into play again from your perspective, not just the investor's perspective. So I'm going to flip the question. How does an investor stand out to a broker to get the first dibs on either their off-market deals or pocket listings or whatnot?
Yeah, that's a great question. So this is an adage from our residential days. Is your buyer ready, willing, and able? So are they ready? Are they in a 1031 exchange? Well, they're ready because it's timing. Are they getting an inheritance or it's part of an estate? They have that money, so they are ready to pull the trigger. When I say they're ready, they already have their down payment lined up. And that brings me to the able question is, when I'm asking you about what kind of properties you want to buy, what kind of down payment money, and then more importantly, your all-in type of cost, your construction, what else you're going to bring to the table. So we don't want to max out just your down payment. You don't have money to buy this asset for construction and get it leased up. So are you able to buy the property, and are you willing? Are there other investors that are going to be part of this process? Do you have to run it by the wife? Do you have to run it by a board? All these different things. Are you willing to go pull the trigger? And then outside of that, you have your actual investment criteria. Everyone's heard, we want a good deal. We want a good deal. Well, what is a good deal to you? What is the cash on cash return you want? Are you more worried about a tax hedge that you have all this money that you're making, you want to bring down your taxes? Do you want to be a more active partner in the business, or are you willing to be a limited partner? And then, are you okay with more of an equity multiple? So again, just being more passive, but ultimately, what is the more important investment criteria you have, like yield on cost? So if I'm going into a property that I'm going to make on my net operating income, basically after all expenses, what am I actually making on that property? $1 million, and I'm all in at 10 million, so I'm at 10%. Well, then if I'm going to sell it at 7%, well, there's my spread of 300 basis points. Do I have that clearly outlined in my criteria? Because if we don't, and it's ambiguous on what a good deal is, if we dip down or maybe we're selling at an 8 instead of a 7, well, now it's 200 basis points. Is that still going to make sense for you? Maybe it does, maybe it doesn't. We have to get that clearly defined to make sure you're getting the right type of property to buy.
Got it. Okay. So you've given us a lot of good things that investors should look out for when they're looking for a broker or evaluating a broker, right? I'm sure you have to interview your broker, go through all that shit to figure out if they're a good fit for you. But what is the biggest red flag that you've seen when working with a broker? Either it could be on the investor side or it could be the broker side.
Yeah, so on the brokerage side is, do you know how we're going to present an offer? So how are you going to present your actual buyer? So give you an example, when I'm talking to, maybe if it's a larger ownership of properties, and then that listing agent's going to ask me, look, this is the criteria we typically take on any type of offer on any type of our properties. What do they own? Have they done this before? Can you show me proof of funds, etc.? Some of these basic things that we need to have those conversations about. And is your broker asking you these questions? If they're not, and not telling you they have a process, is a huge red flag. Flipping that to an investor, are they going to be forthright with their financials? And then even before that, depending on the situation, are they ready to sign a rep agreement? Because if you're going into a situation and there are sellers that aren't offering what we call a co-op fee or a cooperative fee to the broker, meaning there's a percentage of the purchase price that I'm going to get paid as a broker. If they're not offering that, do you have representation with your buyer to actually move forward and pay you if they're not going to pay on the seller side? And if for some reason they don't want to talk through that, or they don't want to agree to that, because at the end of the day, it's got to be mutual, and both parties have to be prepared. The broker has to know exactly how they're going to take you through this process, and then also the investor has to be able to understand, okay, these are the steps, and we're working as a team together. And if there is a disconnect with either of the parties, it's just not going to make sense to work with one another.
Got it. So in the brokerage world, there's a lot of data, there's a lot of shit going around, right? You have to be organized with your investors, your buyers, right? You have to be organized on the selling side, on the properties that people would want to go to you to sell for them or market for them. Yep. And then on the leasing side, that's another aspect. So you essentially have 3 different pools here. And on top of that, you got all the fucking data that comes with the building in and of itself.
Yes.
How do you keep yourself organized? So like, what tools or what tech do you use or CRM do you use to organize all this data and keep yourself on track to meeting these deadlines and milestones?
Yeah, great question. With any client in those categories, there is a full process that we will go through. So they will go through a separate consultation based upon what the role we are going to play in that transaction. And then within our CRM, we use RealNext. It's basically a commercially real estate focused platform where we have ways to organize projects and then take them through that funnel for each step. So we want to make sure that we've gone through those steps and we're not missing anything, and it's repeatable. So you want to make sure that we're going through specific steps. Let's take, for example, for a tenant. So if a tenant wants 10 to 20,000 square feet, they're an industrial user, X amount of dock doors. Again, this is the basic criteria, but then when we do drive it, is the location going to make sense? Does the outdoor storage make sense? How far is it from their customers as well as their employees that are going to work there? And then what kind of quality of life they're going to have inside the site, because maybe they don't have the money for the construction of the office component. So are we getting that from the landlord? Are we going to be able to amortize that into the rate so they're paying for it, but they're not paying for it up front? All these different things we need to go through, whether they're a tenant on the landlord side, how are we representing this to potential tenants? Who would be the person that we can maximize the value? Because again, when you're taking on these different hats, it's a totally different transformation, and how to stay focused and organized is key. You can't just be dilly-dallying in them, okay, I'm going to be a landlord for one day and then, tenant the next day. You have to be able to focus on these particular things. But there's overlap as well, because when I'm representing a tenant, I have to see it from a landlord rep side. Even though I'm your advocate, I'm trying to get you the best deal, and I will push to get you the best deal, the landlord, it's within reason. So, in really what I've found, it's always a partnership. When I've signed deals, regardless of the size, when everyone was happy and I still was getting a better than market deal, it still made sense. But you have to have a segmented process for each of these platforms you're talking about, whether you're investing, whether you're the landlord or the tenant.
Love that. So I want to peek behind the curtain just a little bit more. We're going to pull it back a little bit.
Sure.
So with these three different pools of, I guess, individuals or parties that you have to kind of court and find, so, your investors, buyers, your sellers, and tenants. What's your process like in order to find more of those people?
Yeah, that's a good question. With tenants, for example, that's typically what I will focus on. It's what pools of information I have access to, whether it's people that I've known, past clients, whether that is just my outbound marketing methods that I use to showcase what I can offer a tenant base and then get inbound traffic. It's other brokers from other states. I mean, I'm working with one pretty large client right now, and that was from a broker from another state just because we know each other and they have that specific clientele. It's an industrial client. And it's got to be a combination. You can't rely on one well to get water for the type of tenants. And then as far as like finding other investors, it's, again, you have to be in the know. You have to be active in local groups, whether it is other brokers. And, I've referred business to other brokers where I wasn't going to be able to serve my client the best way. I have co-listings with large land brokers because that's not really what I do. I don't list 100-acre, 200-acre parcels, but one of my good friends, that's all he does. And I will, partner with him on certain deals. It just depends. But at the end of the day, you want to be able to showcase your skills to a variety of people. And I think the biggest pool that I get clients from is my past client base. These are people that I already know, like, and trust me. I've already done deals with them, and then I grow through the growing pains of their own business, and that's what I can only hope for my clients. I want them to get bigger spaces, but more importantly, to have impact on their employees as well as the clients that they're servicing.
And are you sourcing any off-market deals like the the three big ones are Reonomy, Crexy, CoStar. I'm sure there's other ones now, but a lot of brokers, from what I've seen, they've utilized these platforms and they're expensive as hell.
Yep.
So they're getting the data from this, and they're either doing some type of outbound outreach. So they're cold calling, they're sending direct mail. Do you guys do that, or have you found that to be effective?
Yeah, it is effective with both things you're talking about with cold calling as well as mailers and even just outreach online, depending if you could find the decision makers. So all those platforms we use at our firm have access to, and it's really just how you're going to use the data in different ways, because at the end of the day, there isn't one platform that is going to be, the holy grail of this is a hot lead. And again, it's really, there's a constant push that you have to do with these lists. You're not going to call one list and then you're going to get a ton of, off market opportunities. And really where I was succeeding on the residential side, it was through other brokers and other vendors. Talking to the insurance agent, talking to the attorney that maybe has clients that want to offload property, because they're having those hard discussions that I'm not going to be privy to. And then if I'm in front of them putting, my case studies and putting my email blasts and text blasts to them, that I'm always going to be connected. And it's just really, it's a cumulative effort. Like, those platforms are great to talk to individual owners, but it's not going to happen on the first try. You have to keep on calling and calling, and it has bear fruit over time.
It's very time intensive, right? It's almost a full-time job. I know people that they dial probably 30 hours a week, 40 hours a week, right? And for the first couple months, 6 months even, maybe even a year, you're probably not going to find anything. It's just constant follow-up, constant outreach. So yeah, it is cumbersome. You're going to have somebody help do that, right? Whether it be VAs or someone that you hire in, etc. On the brokerage side, there's, like I've mentioned before, there's a ton of brokers out there, right? And they know a shit ton about all of these properties, especially the really good ones, right? They know all the details that you need to know. So why do you think that there aren't more brokers that are becoming investors themselves and they're just doing the transactions?
Yeah, I think there's two trains of thought. The one train of thought is, I'm going to be competition to my own clientele. And where I defer from that is, look, at the end of the day, we want to be not selfish, but we want to be self-interested. And when we're self-interested, we are putting ourselves first to better serve our clients. And I'll give you a real-world example. Like, there's a property that I'm trying to get a listing on, where we could sell this, make a few $1,000,000 for my client. But I told him, at the basis he bought it at, let's just put something in there to rent. You're not hurting for cash, and it's gonna, instead of a pretty large fee, it's still gonna be a pretty large fee, but like it's a fraction of what it would be before. I'm looking out for my client. Like, I could just tell them, to sell it and make a ton of money. And then people say, you're going to be competition. Again, not every deal your clients can buy. I think your client would want to know, first and foremost, are you considering this investment? How can you walk through the deal like you're the actual investor? So I think owning properties, or at least attempting to own properties, or it doesn't even have to be a commercial property. You own a duplex. I mean, something that is income producing, because this is the business that we chose, and we have to understand it from their perspective. So that is one train of thought why I think some of the brokers don't go in. They think they're competition, and or they think it's a distraction. I want to only focus on brokerage. This is what I do. It's going to take away from me being a broker. And I really don't agree with either of those. But, again, to each their own.
Got it. Okay. In the brokerage world, it's pretty cyclical, right? Within a year, within maybe 2 years, and that's just talking outside of what's happening in the macroeconomics of the real estate world in general. So how do you stay motivated during like super slow markets, or when deals just continuously fall through?
Yeah, with, again, it really wasn't a large downturn, but I got a couple clients, they got spooked by the tariffs, where basically I'm trying to explain to them, and look, no one can, force a horse to drink from the water. We can only take them there. But at the end of the day, certain things are out of our control, whether it be geopolitical, whether it be if you're going to do development, NIMBY, zoning changes, financial, etc. We have to just look at what we can control, and if it still makes sense at the time, try to move forward. So there'll be these challenges that will come up, but how to stay motivated is I have to have a big pipeline. At the end of the day, any brokers that I talk to on a regular basis, regardless of where they're at, whether it's here or throughout the U.S., it's just are you constantly in the market? And you got to enjoy what you do, but at the end of the day, whether you enjoy it or not, like, are you getting purpose out of it? And do you have the real clients that are going to feed your business? This business isn't for the faint of heart, because there's so many things that can go wrong and do go wrong. But at the end of the day, you're looking for the positive outcome, and that only comes with you building a book of business that is sustainable and can grow over time.
So essentially, you have to have thick skin, and you got to be able to wait it out and to build that book of business in order to see some of the fruits of your labor, right? And it could be a year down the road, maybe 2 years down the road. Who knows? Would you say that that's probably the most challenging part of being a commercial real estate broker?
Yeah. I mean, the ramp up from 22 to about 9 months ago is hard, but that's hard for everybody. Every single broker I've talked to, 9, 12 months are going to pass by, and then they close one deal. It is not something you can just turn on. And then, who is your support network? So I'm a part of some broker masterminds that these are other brokers from across the country that are doing the same thing. They maybe have a small team, or they are part of a large company, and everything in between. So I can figure out, where did they succeed, where did they fail, and what are they learning to get better. So yeah, it takes time to ramp up. I can tell you with myself, it took a good 18 months to get a good solid foundation for business, and really just getting your licks in, meaning just let me just do this 1,500 square foot lease. My first lease was 600 square feet with an attorney and his assistant. It was a box, but he's done this 8 times over his 35-year career. And I'm like, okay, great. This is my first lease. This is after I did some of those owner-user deals I was talking about earlier. And, now fast forward, it's like, okay, I've got these dozens of deals in. I know how to kind of read the room in some of these smaller deals and now some of these bigger ones. And how do I take that collective experience and turn it into a book of business?
Gotcha. So over the years, in real estate, it's a people business. It's a relationship business. And you're going to have awesome people, great people. You're going to have shitheads. How do you handle the shitty clients and or, shitty investors or shitty sellers or shitty tenants, during negotiations? And have you ever had to fire anybody?
That's a great question. I fired someone this morning. It was a tenant. And essentially what I tell everyone this: there's 2 people in the world. There's reasonable and unreasonable people. That's it. And when an unreasonable person that you took through a process, even gone up into the actual lease, and they fall off, that you can't get a hold of them over the phone, they are not telling you why they don't like a deal, whether this is in a PSA or a lease, and we can't get communication from said client, my only choice for both respecting my current clients as well, of course, myself and my business, is I have to let you go and wish you the best. There isn't a reason for us to keep on working together when we're just not working as a team. It's just not clicking. you're not telling me what's wrong, so I have to let you go.
I get it. I get it. Sometimes you got to fire the shitty ones, man. You
Yeah.
got to keep the good ones, and 80-20 rule. Keep the 20% that keeps coming, that brings that 80% of value, right? During your, let's say we're under contract for a building, or we're working on getting under contract through an LOI or a PSA or whatever. What is the art from your perspective of negotiating a great deal? Or I guess the second part of that is, have you seen any common mistakes that investors have done during a negotiation that just fucked them up?
Yeah. So it's all about uncovering the hidden value that is not said by that listing agent. So what am I able to see that they're not seeing in that vacancy, where I could retool that space, what they're not thinking about? Some mistakes that have been made is, look, they've already told us this roof is shot. We need to upfront get a concession so we can kind of just put that aside now in our physical due diligence. We don't have to worry about it anymore. We've already known that you're going to spend X amount of capex once you get into this building, but let's take it off the table. Because what this is going to do is, one, you're prepared for it. And two, we're not going to just go spend all this money on due diligence, whether that be through a property condition assessment, through a phase one, through a survey. Again, most properties you're going to spend from 1 to 3 to maybe even 5% of the actual purchase price on due diligence. So if we can head these things up front, and then I've seen investors will just say, you know what, I'll just handle it when I get in. I think it's a mistake. And I've seen people just not only waste money, they waste time. And then they really waste the seller's time. And you got to think long term, because if this listing agent on the other side is going to maybe feed me deals, or maybe, I'm not in that market, feeds you deals, how are they going to feel if you just really didn't look at these things in that past deal in the correct light? And then they're not going to take you seriously in the future on a deal that maybe is a killer deal, but you're not going to get access to it.
So you got to be transparent, right?
100%. Yeah.
Got it.
You got to
Okay.
put this information right in front.
Love that. What is one thing about being a broker that most people would be surprised to learn?
Every day, you gotta have a set process in place. You get frantic. There's a lot of things going on at once. You got X amount of leases going on. They're at different stages. Some of them might be, at LOI stage. Maybe you've already signed a lease, but you're part of the construction, or you want to. Again, even though you're not managing that construction for them, like you're the one that brought them in, or all these different things, you're waiting for them to get occupied. You have to have a set process in place. So when you wake up, are you time blocking? Are you making sure that for the morning we're doing X, Y, Z? Is it my prospecting time? Is it me just to see where my deals are at? Am I having meetings that week with other vendors or other stakeholders that are part of a deal? I can tell you tomorrow I'm going to be walking a space. We just signed the lease for a tech firm, and I'm going to be walking with the architect. So we're doing what we call locates. We're going to locate all the electrical, all the plumbing, all the mechanical. They're laying out, where everything's going to be, because we're going to take that to the interior designer that is going to interface with my client. So all these things are going to need to be put into place while I have other deals going on that day. So do I have this process in place? Am I still engaging the market? Because I want to know what's going on. I talked to a guy, they just put up a brand new industrial building, and I was curious, what is the real amenities in that property? Because he's only advertising this base rate. Well, that base rate only tells you so much. It says $1,800 a month, but if you add a bathroom, if you add a slop sink, if you add an office, it jacks it up $100, $200, $300 a month. With me not knowing that and knowing the occupancy of that building, that is nowhere online. So am I still doing the networking ear to the ground versus working in my business on my deals. You have to have your cadence, if you will. And that is, I mean, I'm not going to act like I have it figured out 100% all the time, because I don't. But like, I'm trying to get better, and just, making sure that you are dedicating yourself, percentage wise of your time to these different disciplines, if you will.
Love that. In short, you have to remain calm, and you got to have some type of system where your ducks are pretty much all in a row still.
Yeah.
To keep your head above water, essentially.
100%.
What does your day typically look like? Like, do you batch things out? Is everything kind of ruled by your calendar? And I guess how are you keeping all this shit kind of organized and, one right after the other?
Yeah, typically I like to have either super early morning meetings from like 8 to 9:30, or they got to be in the afternoon, because most of my like midday is call-ins to seeing where my deals are at. Take a brief lunch, and then also I have like my monthly networking meetings like today. Every month I have a certain investor meeting that I go to. It's a collection of brokers, but majority are investors. And I've been active with that for a number of years. And like, I make that a priority because I do want to know what some of these developers are doing. I do want to every now and then meet different vendors, because I need to, cut costs for some, for my own clients as well as myself. So I have certain events that I'm a part of in certain associations. And then just seeing, okay, am I meeting my certain benchmarks for X amount of consultations when it comes to buyers and tenants? And then am I walking away with X amount of rep agreements for that week? And those are basically like some baseline metrics that I measure in my business.
Love that. You got to measure it in some way, shape, or form, right?
Yeah.
Man, I wish I had 50 Jimmys, just one in every state. You know what I mean? Maybe you should get licensed in every state so you make my life a little bit easier.
Hey, I can work through broker of records. So look, I can work in all 50 states. I'm part of a larger organization. So even though my brokerage is called Skyrise CRE, I work through KW Commercial, but I have relationships in multiple states. And just like we've talked about on other deals in other states, like I'm more than happy to give you some baseline intelligence, but then really give you the local broker that's going to know the lay of the land. Because at the end of the day, whoever you are as an investor, yes, there's data online. Yes, we can pull from these records that we talked about, these different portals. But I do believe, even in the age of AI and everything else, you still want to have some market intelligence. You still got to go to the property. You kind of have to know what is going on, because there are some hidden data points, whether it's construction, whether there's a bankruptcy that came out, there's a large vacancy that's coming that might affect your property, etc. All these different things, you want to have that local knowledge as well.
Got it. You mentioned that you were in a couple masterminds, right? In essence, you're investing in yourself for the relationships, for the networking, etc. What other ways or what other resources are you investing in yourself? Call it a book, a podcast, or YouTube University, whatever. Give us one or two things that have been a game changer for you in your quest to becoming the best fucking broker out there.
Yeah, I mean, there is Adventures in CRE. So that is a.CRE, no affiliation, but they do have a lot of performas, a lot of templates. And what I love to do is go through those with different models, different examples. So if it's like, one thing that's hot is small bay industrial. So some of the clients that I've talked to, I'm like, look, you could probably put that on this property. Let's see if it makes sense. They just have a lot of these free templates. They do have a lot of videos. That's how I initially got interested in commercial real estate. So I had to lend my hat to them. CCIM as well, of course. They have the foundational courses, which I'm starting to get into, as I do want to get my PIN. That would be one, because I've taken some of their electives, prior to getting 100% into commercial. So those would be two resources I would recommend.
Love that. what's next for you, Jimmy? Like, just obviously we know your market's in the indie market and you can actually transact nationwide, but what's the next milestone for you, whether it be 6 months, 12 months, whatever?
Yeah, it's to get bigger and better clients. A lot of the clients that you got to fire some. It's typically the smaller clients that are giving me headaches, and that's not an arrogant thing to say. I think every broker would agree that it's never the bigger clients. Bigger clients jump for joy, 5, 10, 20,000 square feet. These are easier, more well-capitalized clients. So that's what I'm going after. And then, of course, to find, those niche properties to buy on the commercial side. So, still actively looking at the market. Had a property earlier this year. It just didn't work out on the due diligence side, on the physical, but, I am trying to find, a good commercial property for me to invest in. So those are two of the things I'm focusing on. Bigger clients, and really also with the first part, more challenges that are going to bring more value. And of course, the more value I'm going to bring to my client, the more money I'm going to make. So everybody wins.
Absolutely. How much time are you like spending analyzing all these data points to find either the best investment for yourself or something for your client or just market research in general?
Yeah, typically when it's for myself, I'm trying to get better at like more of a cadence. Typically, I like to do that in the afternoon, after hours, like 5:30, 30 minutes. I have my alerts through these platforms that we've talked about, where I have my criteria, whether that be just, again, these are baseline things that it's not going to tell you everything, but okay, if in this market things are selling for 125, 140 on the industrial side, and I see anything under 80, it might get me excited. So I have those alerts. I'm going to look at it. Same thing with retail. If I'm going to see something that's selling for 110 and I have my alerts for under 70, maybe there's a spread there. So having that time to look at it, again, we talked about putting your investor hat on if you're going to be a better broker. That's what I'm doing at that time frame. Just again, you got to dedicate some time, but I got to get better, always having on my calendars for one thing, doing it as another.
Love that. Well, Jimmy, that's essentially all I had for you, brother. Thank you for letting us peek behind the curtain of what it truly takes to be a broker and how we could make your lives easier and how you could make ours easier.
Of course.
If people wanted to connect with you or they could add value to you in any way, where can they find you?
Absolutely. Well, if you find me on LinkedIn, that's Jumha, Jumha, and my last name is Shatara, Shatara. So you can find me there. You can find me on YouTube, this at my name, Jumha Shatara. On Instagram, JT Shatara as well, and is on Facebook too. So more than happy to help if you just need some advice on the deal. Just my perspective, more than happy to discuss it.
I gotta add this. I don't think I follow you on maybe one or two of those, but not all of them. But I'll have them in the show notes for people to check out and whatnot. But yeah, appreciate your time, brother. I hope I can get you in later time, maybe after we do some fucking deals together or something.
Let's go. I'm down.